Imagine a scenario so completely wild it sounds like alternate history fiction, but it actually reveals exactly how fragile our modern world truly is. In this explainer, we're unpacking a frankly terrifying geopolitical thought experiment, one that completely shatters everything we know about European stability. We're diving right into the mechanics of a modern breakdown, really tracing how quickly the systems we all blindly rely on every single day could just unravel. I mean, think about it. What if one of Europe's oldest allies suddenly became its most shocking enemy? We're talking about France here, a nation that hasn't fought a war against Britain in over 2 centuries, somehow making the impossible decision to cross the English Channel with overwhelming military force in 2026. And to be clear, this isn't about economic sanctions or some diplomatic spot. We're talking about direct, forceful military action across a narrow stretch of water that separated these two nations for hundreds of years. The psychological shock of this alone would be a continental earthquake. You look at the dynamic, and literally overnight, a vital cultural partner and an indispensable NATO ally transforms into a direct nuclear-armed aggressor. It's wild. The entire strategic logic of Europe just fractures. This wouldn't be your traditional war over borders. It would be a profound psychological trauma for the entire continent, completely rewriting the rulebook of modern international relations in just a matter of hours. In those first tense hours, the world wouldn't even believe the alerts flashing across their screens. How did we get here would be the only question on everyone's mind. As rumors inevitably outpace the actual facts, intelligence agencies would be in a state of absolute sheer panic. They'd be frantically analyzing satellite imagery, just trying to figure out, is this a limited strike, a blockade, or the whole shebang, a full-scale campaign? Meanwhile, French officials would be left scrambling to explain the unthinkable to their own deeply divided public and, of course, a totally stunned international community. So, how does a modern invasion between powerful allies actually kick off? Well, the English Channel would instantly become the most aggressively analyzed stretch of water on the planet. History tells us that in war, confusion isn't just a minor hiccup. It's the opening wound from which everything else bleeds. The goal in these crucial opening moments isn't to destroy, but to completely and utterly disorient the enemy. Because a 21st century invasion doesn't actually begin with boots on a beach. It starts in the servers. Before a single physical soldier even moves, a synchronized invisible war kicks off. First, you've got cyber disruption actively blinding the power grids, then electronic suppression silencing early warning sensors, all while immense maritime pressure suffocates the coast. It's data versus data. Emergency communication networks and critical infrastructure become the absolute highest value targets, specifically designed to paralyze the nation from the inside out. And, your ordinary citizen wouldn't be sitting there thinking about grand military strategy. They'd be plunged into instant, everyday panic. Think about it. Flights grounded midair, ATM screens going completely dark, and the supply chains delivering the vast majority of fresh food across the channel just freezing overnight. Social media would absolutely flood with terrifying speculation, and families would find themselves completely upended by the sudden, violent loss of basic modern stability. But let's say an invading force actually manages to push through that initial digital and electronic blackout. Well, then they run headfirst into a very physical, ancient reality, the formidable barrier of the English Channel and a deeply prepared defender standing on the other side. Britain would instantly leverage its highly recognizable defensive geography, turning those waters into a massive, lethal strategic choke point. The Channel isn't just a moat anymore, right? It is a highly integrated, multi-domain fortress. Beneath the waves, naval interception is waiting. In the airspace above, you've got advanced radar systems tracking every single incoming missile threat. And in the digital realm, heavily hardened communications ensure the defenders can't be completely blinded. The sea actively dictates the entire balance of power here, turning distance itself into a lethal defensive weapon. Securing a beachhead against a fully mobilized British public would be an absolute logistical nightmare. Keep in mind, Britain hasn't been successfully invaded across the Channel since 1066. Invaders aren't just facing rapid response military units stationed at known logistical choke points. They're facing heavy coastal surveillance and a localized, deeply resilient civilian resistance that knows literally every single inch of their own terrain. The sheer scale of that resistance would make rapid occupation practically impossible. So this raises the ultimate analytical question. What would France actually want? Because no modern European state can launch an attack of this scale without facing enormous internal protests at home. Are they fighting for physical territory, complete control over maritime trade routes, or is this some massive geopolitical shock meant to force a major political concession? The why behind the invasion is absolutely crucial because it determines whether this remains a severe regional dispute or triggers a total continental collapse. And make no mistake, this conflict absolutely wouldn't stay local. The shockwaves would reshape the world order overnight, seriously testing the resilience of institutions that have maintained global peace for decades. Take the United Nations, for example. The entire UN Security Council would instantly be paralyzed. Why? Because two of its permanent veto-wielding members are suddenly directly at war with one another. Global governance would effectively freeze right in its tracks. Then you have the European Union and NATO, which would be thrust into an unprecedented legal and diplomatic nightmare. The whole alliance exists on the fundamental assumption that members protect each other under Article 5. So if France attacks Britain, who does the United States defend? This impossible paradox pushes the entire security architecture to the brink, leaving every other allied state terrified of spillover and the potential irreversible fracture of Western alliances. Economically speaking, the freeze would be instantaneous. With one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world severed, insurance costs would skyrocket, triggering a massive, panicked flight of global investors. The global economy is so deeply integrated with both of these nations that a localized war across the English Channel would instantly trigger a worldwide recession. Supply chains break, corporate investments halt, tourism collapses, and the economic contagion spreads way, way beyond Europe. In response to all this, global diplomats really wouldn't care about who's right or who's wrong initially. Their only frantic goal would be hitting the brakes before the dominoes fall. The UN issues panicked urgent statements, European leaders universally demand de-escalation, Washington applies immense backroom pressure, and secure back-channel talks light up instantly. In a crisis moving this incredibly fast, raw diplomatic connection becomes just as vital to survival as actual ammunition. Now, we really need to slow down for a second and address the most dangerous existential reality of this entire scenario. Then comes the nuclear shadow. Because remember, both of these nations are not just conventional military powers. They possess highly advanced, deeply integrated nuclear arsenals. And that single, terrifying fact fundamentally changes the calculus of every single decision made during the conflict. This brings us to what experts call the invisible ceiling of fear. When two nuclear states fight conventionally, there's this constant underlying dread. Every single tactical move, every destroyed command node is weighed against the terrifying possibility of triggering a world-ending escalation. Literally one accidental strike or one misread early warning signal could spiral the crisis entirely out of control. It places leaders under unimaginable, paralyzing pressure, where a single miscalculation means total annihilation. But if you strip away the grand geopolitical chess match, you are left with a profound human tragedy. We're talking about families separated by a sudden iron curtain of fear, exhausted emergency workers pushing far past their limits in burning cities, children falling asleep to the sound of air raid sirens. For two nations with such immense shared history, decades of deeply intertwined culture and friendship would be shattered into a personal tragedy in a matter of hours. It all points back to a pretty stark reality. Modern nations are far more vulnerable to chaos than they appear. As we've explored here, our deeply connected systems can unravel almost instantly. A single reckless decision can tear down highly complex networks of trade, security, and trust that took decades to carefully build. Sure, military strength is important, but absolute restraint and diplomacy, that is what actually keeps the lights on. So I leave you with this lingering thought. What happens when the unbreakable assumptions holding peace together suddenly disappear? This hypothetical scenario serves as a severe warning that peace is not some automatic default state. It's a fragile, highly engineered system that demands our constant protection. Because when long-standing allies turn and visible borders become active fault lines overnight. Thanks for joining this explainer. Keep questioning the stability of the world around you and never, ever take the peace you see today for granted.